What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Monday, December 28th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Trae Young from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Trae Young averaged 47.6 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 35 minutes per game with a 35% usage rate. He scored 51 fantasy points last game in 35 minutes with a 38% usage rate. He's projected at 40.7 fantasy points here tonight. That projection looks a little bit low. I think he's good for 50 plus fantasy points in this one, which would be 5 times value or more. He's 9,800 FanDuel salary and 300 less on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 225.5 points scored in this game, so I like Trae Young here versus the Detroit Pistons. Another point guard that I like is Jamal Murray from the Denver Nuggets playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points versus opposing point guards. Jamal Murray averaged 32.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 32 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 34 fantasy points last game in 37 minutes with a 29% usage rate. He's projected at 35.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 7,100 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game. Fantastic matchup. So I like Jamal Murray here versus the Houston Rockets. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. So, of course, guys, James Harden, he's always a monster play. He's 11,500 FanDuel salary and 300 less on DraftKings. He scored 73 fantasy points last game in 43 minutes with a 35% usage rate. He's projected at 51.7 fantasy points here tonight, but it wouldn't surprise me if he goes off for another 60 plus fantasy points here. So of course I like James Harden here versus the Denver Nuggets. But if you want to save some salary at the shooting guard position, take a look at Jordan Clarkson from the Utah Jazz playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Jordan Clarkson has averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 24 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. He scored 27 fantasy points last game in 23 minutes with a 32% usage rate. He's projected at 22.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 4,500 FanDuel salary and 400 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 220 points scored in this game, so I like Jordan Clarkson here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. And an excellent value play here tonight is Dillon Brooks from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Brooklyn Nets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing shooting guards. Dillon Brooks averaged 25.3 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 29 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 28 fantasy points last game in 30 minutes with a 34% usage rate. He's projected at 25.8 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 7 times value because he's only 3,700 FanDuel salary Although he is 1,800 more on DraftKings, Vegas thinks there's going to be 237.5 points scored in this game. So amazing FanDuel play here. He's a lock for me on FanDuel. So I like Dillon Brooks here versus the Brooklyn Nets.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Will Barton from the Denver Nuggets playing the Houston Rockets, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the third most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Will Barton averaged 31.2 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 33 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He scored 28 fantasy points last game in 28 minutes with a 23% usage rate, and he's projected at 29.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 5,800 FanDuel salary and 400 more on DraftKings. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game. Fantastic matchup. So I like Will Barton here versus the Houston Rockets. Okay, who do we have at the power forward position? I like Robert Covington from the Portland Trailblazers playing the LA Lakers, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Robert Covington averaged 29.7 fantasy points per game on the season in an average of 31 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 26 fantasy points last game in 38 minutes with an 11% usage rate. He's projected at 27.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 5,200 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. So I like Robert Covington here versus the LA Lakers. The other power forward that I like is Bojan Bogdanovic from the Utah Jazz playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Bojan Bogdanovic averaged 27.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 33 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He scored 22 fantasy points in 34 minutes with a 19% usage rate last game. Now he's projected at 24 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 4,700 FanDuel salary and 900 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 220 points scored in this game, so I like Bojan Bogdanovic here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Jonas Valanciunas from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Brooklyn Nets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing centers. Jonas Valanciunas averaged 34 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 26 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 35 fantasy points in 28 minutes with a 21% usage rate last game, projected at 35.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 7,200 FanDuel salary and 500 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 237.5 points scored in this game, so a high-scoring game. So I like Jonas Valanciunas here versus the Brooklyn Nets.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.